Hello class, how you having a good day today, I hope. Today we're going to speak about the lesson 7.1 from our book. It's entitled The Healthy Economy. So back in 1946, the Employment Act expanded the U.S. government's role in the economy. Remember, before that we didn't have a lot of input on the economy, but we started having more once we had the Great Depression, and then the government started getting more as of 1946. It focused on three goals: achieving full employment, stabilizing prices, and growing the economy. So we're going to look at each one of these goals. Full employment. Now, what is full employment? Well, that actually is what we mean by that is not really what it sounds like it means. It is 95% of the country's labor force has jobs, and 5% or less is unemployed. That would be considered full employment. Now, there are some things that this does not take into consideration. It doesn't take into consideration those people who have given up on finding a job and stopped looking for one. And how they actually come up with these numbers is primarily by looking at the employment commissions in each of the states to see who is signed up for unemployment benefits and who is searching through their job listings for jobs and so forth like that. So you can see that full employment actually doesn't mean everybody that wants to work has a job. It's a little bit different than that. Some unemployment occurs naturally, so that's not a concern for us if it just occurs naturally. Those types of unemployment, the first one is frictional unemployment, and that occurs when people are between jobs. These workers may be getting training or searching for better jobs. You've probably been in that situation sometime in your life where you basically don't have a job right now, but you intend to have one real soon. So that's okay. It doesn't hurt our economy at all at that point. Seasonal unemployment also doesn't really hurt us because our economy expects that. So expected changes in the economy, such as those depending on the season of the year, like lifeguards or ski instructors, people that actually have to work only when there's good weather. Roofers may be considered a seasonal job. Now, there are some types of unemployment that are unhealthy for our economy. Structural unemployment results from changes in the structure of the economy. For example, new technology creates some jobs but eliminates others. So if that's eliminating enough other jobs, then that could be a real problem there. Cyclical unemployment results from changes in the nation's business cycle. So if our business cycle changes, then the jobs could change. And that's another one we have to be concerned about. There are two main phases of the cyclical unemployment, and that's the expansion part of a business cycle, which occurs when the gross domestic product, or the GDP, rises over time. And we've talked about that before, expansion phase, when the gross domestic product rises. And then there's also the contraction phase, when the gross domestic product falls over time. Now those are okay, but the over time is the part that we have to look at. If it occurs for a long enough period of time, then that could be a big problem for our economy. Cyclical unemployment occurs mostly during the contraction phase. So if you remember what the contraction phase means, that's where the gross domestic product gets smaller. We have fewer products, we have fewer amounts of money going through the system, and that leads to more unemployment. So the firms that are producing goods have fewer goods, and so workers are laid off during this contraction phase, and that's why that becomes a problem there. Okay, next thing we're going to talk about is price instability. Well, you know, stability means when it's stable, it stays the same. So if it's unstable, it's not staying the same. So price instability is the upswing or downswing of the prices in the goods we buy. So there's two types of price instability. Of course, one that goes up and one goes down. So inflation and deflation. So let's look at inflation first. Inflation occurs when the overall price level for goods and services increases over time. So when everything starts going up in price, the inflation rate is the percentage of the price increases. So when they say rate, they mean percent. Think of rate and percent means the same thing. So the percentage of the inflation based on what it is at one point and then what it becomes. It shows the price increase for all products and not just one or a few, so overall of the economy. Economists debate the cause of inflation. That really means that they really are not sure what causes it. There are various different theories of what causes it, and that's what they mean by they debate it. They are talking about each economist has their own theory of what actually causes the inflation. Many of them think that it could be caused by too much money, and too much money is available for purchasing too few goods. So this results in people willing to pay more for goods. So think about it. If you've got a lot of money but there's not much out there to buy, you'll say, well, I got all this money, I can't spend it on something else, so let me go ahead and spend more of it on this and make sure I get it. And that's what that means on too much money is available. Higher wages, more expensive energy, or other increased costs could force firms to charge higher prices for their goods also. So if we have other things happening in our economy, higher prices, more expensive energy, more increased costs, other increased costs, that could cause inflation too, because the prices are going to have to go up because the owners of the businesses have to increase their prices. An inflation rate of 2 to 3% per year is considered normal. So think of that, 2 or 3% per year, that's normal. When the inflation rate rises above 10%, it's considered a serious problem. So then we're starting to get into economic problems there when it's over 10%. A high inflation rate reduces the value of our money, and that means that the purchasing power of each dollar falls. So we can't buy as much for the same amount of dollars. So if you have $1 now, that would buy a nice sized candy bar. With inflation, you might have to put $2 toward buying that candy bar because the value of that $1 is not as high anymore. So it's not the value is not worth the whole candy bar. It's only worth half a candy bar at that point. So it makes everybody in the economy, the country, the people, the businesses, makes it difficult to plan how to use scarce resources. And that's why the price instability, inflation causes a problem. Now, deflation, of course, that's the opposite. It gets smaller. Deflation occurs when overall prices of goods decrease over time. So even though it sounds great if you're a consumer that you have lower prices, it's really not, because it's a serious concern for our overall economy. That if it were just a short-term thing, yeah, it would be great. But over time is the problem. When you say it's over time, that means it's going to stay around for a while. Even a small percent of decline in price levels sends negative signals to businesses. And that's where the problem comes. The businesses say, oh, prices are going down, so we can't afford to do the way we've been doing. So the businesses tend to decrease production and to start laying off workers because of that deflation. And of course, that's bad for the economy. So think about this. What will occur in the business cycle when workers are laid off in many businesses? So just choose one of those answers. A contraction or a trough, which is the same thing, a contraction and a trough, may occur. An expansion or peak may occur. Okay, so think about it. A contraction or trough means that it goes down, the amount of gross product goes down. An expansion is when it goes up. So if you are having businesses are laying off workers, that's going to make less money available for people to spend. So it's going to contract the economy or make a trough. And a small contraction, of course, is fine, but a large one is not fine. That's when we're starting to have problems. Okay, economic growth occurs when the real gross product, economic growth occurs when the real GDP, the size of the economy adjusted for inflation, increases over a significant period of time. So the real GDP means the gross product is adjusted for inflation. That means they take inflation into consideration, and thinking about like if it was the same amount of gross product for a month, and all of a sudden inflation kicks in, well, that's going to change what the numbers look like for the GDP, but it really doesn't make it mean the same thing when you have inflation added in there. So if you took out the inflation, would the number be the same in 1 month, or would it be different? So they're saying they're looking at the inflation and adjusting it for that. I hope that made sense to you. And especially if that economic growth of the real GDP increases over a significant period of time. So that means more than a few days or more than a few weeks. So months maybe. To determine whether our economy is growing, economists look at long-term trends. So they look at what's happening over a long period of time. In the past, there have been many brief contractions and 2 severe depressions over the last century or so. So contractions, not as bad as a depression, but they're still in the same direction. However, the expansions, which when it goes up instead of down, outweighed the brief contractions. So the expansions were more than the contractions. That makes it a long-term trend in the U.S. economy has been one of economic growth. So overall, the economic growth has been the trend in the United States economy. Taking in consideration all of the other depressions and so forth even. Now, what is the causes of economic growth? Well, economic growth is the result of wise use of society's resources, which are also called factors of production. And I think we covered that in a previous lesson in Chapter 6, what factors of production means. But we'll look at it again. Natural resources, which is like good soil and fresh water that support agriculture. Supplies of oil and minerals that support mining industries and fuel the economy. Human resources, so education, job training, and healthcare build a skilled and healthy labor force, so that's good for us. Support for entrepreneurs helps create new businesses, products, and services. Now, I'm not sure if we've talked about the word entrepreneur before, although I think we've actually had it come up in the class, but I like the word entrepreneur. I think it's French, as we have some of the strange words in our language come from French, the French language, and I think this one is one. I'm not going to swear to it, but let's look at what that sentence tells it. It actually tells us what it means. Entrepreneurs help create new businesses, products, and services. So if there's a brand new idea that an inventor comes up with, and he gets a business to produce it, and they start selling it, then that business and the inventor are entrepreneurs. So they're starting something brand new, something people haven't seen before. Now, of course, that's a very scary situation to be in for a lot of people, and that's why there's not a lot of people that would do it, because there's a greater chance of failure on something that hasn't been tested out on the market. People don't know what it is. You have to try to figure out some way to produce it, and you have to figure out some way to advertise it, and all of these things can lead to either having a failure or having a success. But that's what entrepreneur means. Then we have capital goods. These are the human-made items needed to make products. So something that people make, and then that item is used to make something else that is then sold as a product, as a finished product. Other factors support the wise use of our resources also. One of them that I liked in the book that was mentioned was the government must be honest and must enforce fair rules. This provides incentives for people to work hard and for firms to produce efficiently. So those are important things for economic growth.